It's like, oh, that's just the modern world. You just do a paralyzing amount of research for every product that you buy because we all need to have the best. And we've lost something in that process. And that's kind of what I wanted to describe and connect with a little bit.
If I could snap my fingers and go back to like the 90s or something, I would, because having too much information is not good. I think the main problem with products and lists of the best products and all the stuff that we can research is that so much of it is bullshit. So much of it is a product of marketing and advertising and affiliate links and stuff like that.
What you're signifying there is trustworthiness. You're indicating a world where there's inherent mistrust in people representing products because there's individual financial gain tied to that, which has blurred the lines between genuine recommendation and sales pitch. Is that accurate?
Definitely. Genuine recommendation is hard to find. Hey everybody, I'm Evan.
And I'm Cody.
Welcome back to Men's Search for Meaning,
the podcast where we explore concepts that we can all relate to and walk away with a deeper understanding of ourselves and what we think. So the idea for this one came to me when I was watching an advertisement for a mobile game within another mobile game. And I was watching it and thought to myself, oh, this looks kind of fun. That was like my initial thought was, this looks like a fun game. And then very quickly, I think because of my experience with mobile games, I had this realization of, oh, but I'm sure there's just going to be a best way to do it, a best way to clear these different levels. And, once you know what that is, it's a little bit less fun, And I think I was responding to this idea that at times there's something fun about not knowing the best way to do something because it allows more space for creativity. Whereas when you know what the best is, you just feel like you're not doing it the best way if you choose another way of doing it. So it really struck me because I think it's a symptom of modern society that the best is something that we have such easy access to, whether it be trying to find the best restaurant in New York City or the best dentist in your area or the best product, all these different things. So many things, I think, do largely have an answer of best. There are some exceptions like music or movies, sort of the arts where they're much more subjective, but many things have a best. And that's not a tremendous observation in and of itself. But the thing that stood out to me the most was how the best, I think, has worsened some experiences. So we both grew up playing video games. And at those times, the only information you had access to was books, where they, not to date ourselves too much, but they released books with, those were the strategy guides you had. Whereas now you can just go online and search all this stuff. And there's hundreds of people making videos and, writing tutorials and doing all this kind of stuff. And I think that has worsened things in a sense, because now, there's this ultimate reference point always of like the best way to do something in a game, or what is the best weapon in this game, or what is the best car in this game. And there's oftentimes an answer. And I think that takes a little bit of the magic out of it, maybe in a sense. So I'm curious what you think about that. It's an idea that I think I've thought about subconsciously, but it really stood out to me because I experienced it so strongly in this moment of like, oh, this looks fun. Now there's probably just a best way to do it. And that's going to take a lot of the fun out of it. So what do you think of when you hear that?
Well, I like that idea. It can be taken two ways. In one sense, I completely agree with you. In another, I think there's something kind of nice about it. I do relate to the idea that finding out the best way to do something can ruin the organic experience of trying it yourself, especially if we're talking about a creative domain or any domain where you might spontaneously move through the space of it. So for instance, if someone said the best way to play soccer is to, dribble it 3 times, to the left and then take a shot on goal at a, 46-degree angle or something like that, then your decision-making and instincts wouldn't be as important. And it would be more like a formula and it would take the joy out of playing the sport. So I think you're making a similar point, right?
Yeah, I think it doesn't translate to that context. I see what you mean with that example. And I think there are exceptions to this, and I haven't figured out exactly where those boundaries are, but that I think that would be an exception. Like I pointed out before, the arts are another exception. There's no such thing as the best music or the best movies, you know. But for so many things, maybe it's more product specific. There is a best, and or there's we're moving in the direction of there being a best, you know, and for products, and that information is out there via blogs and review sites and everything. So yeah, I think you pointed out two things there, that there are some exceptions, like soccer being one, where someone couldn't say what's the best way to take a shot on goal because there's so many movable variables there. But and also how that can take the fun out of it, which is the part that I was most struck by when I had this observation.
Right. But going to the part where I do like best, and now I'm thinking about all these internet lists, superlative lists that are all over Google and, you know, social media and stuff.
Yeah.
I, in theory, like the idea of knowing what the best toothbrush is. I would like the best toothbrush. I would enjoy that.
Yeah.
I think the problem is twofold with these lists. The first is that the best for one person is not necessarily the best for another, because there's multiple use cases, essentially. Like if someone talks about the best restaurant, you can say this is a 3 Michelin star restaurant that is considered the number one restaurant in, you know, the city of New York or whatever. But that's pretty meaningless, given that I may like a different food. Is it the best Chinese restaurant, best Italian restaurant, whatever it is?
Yeah.
And maybe I'm all about the ambiance. I'm trying to, you know, go and have a luxurious experience and take in the sights or something. And that matters to me just as much as the food. So you'd have to say it's the best through multiple lenses, many different lenses, so many that it wouldn't make sense for the list to do it right. Like for me, part of what makes me enjoy a restaurant is if I can put my arm up like this, and I can lean my arm on the back of a booth or some sort of surface that's leaning height.
You have high standards.
But it's true. The experience I have at a restaurant when I can go like this comfortably is just phenomenal. I mean, like it goes up like 30% in my book. And I think a lot of restaurants do have leaning height booths or just, you know, ledges behind the seating. And most don't. But when they do, oh boy, you know, so if somebody could incorporate even that, which is maybe where maybe AI could figure that out like in many years or something, that would be great. So that's one dimension. Yeah.
Yeah. I think with things like restaurants, I would lump that into the arts category as well, where and I think what's significant about the arts category that I'm referring to is there are many variables, you know, what music is best? Like that's just an unanswerable question. It's hard to say exactly why that's unanswerable, aside from different people have different tastes. You know, there's just a lot of variety of people. So there's no best. Yeah, maybe because things like music and food are suited to personalities, and there's a very broad spectrum of personalities, whereas toothbrush is suited for teeth, and teeth are largely consistent. A clean tooth is a clean tooth, right? There can be differences, you know, maybe someone has many gaps in their teeth or something and they need a different kind of toothbrush. So there's more there's less variability for products where there is a best, and that's why you can say there's a best. But I want to drill down on the toothbrush thing a little bit. So that's originally where
that's almost a dental joke that you made there.
Yeah. Let's floss this one out for a second. So the first time I heard this thought about the toothbrush thing specifically was the actor / comedian Aziz Ansari. Don't know if you know him by name, but you probably would if you saw him. Yeah, he has this bit talking about the best toothbrush and how, you know, he's like, oh, I needed a new toothbrush. So I go online and I search best toothbrush. And he kind of had the same realization I did of like, why do I need the best toothbrush? What even is the best toothbrush? You know, just this this notion of how much best has pervaded our culture. And with the toothbrush, because you said you would like to have the best toothbrush, what is it about that you would respond well to? Because I've thought about this from my perspective, and I kind of enjoyed the days where we would just go to the grocery store and you had 5 choices of toothbrush and you picked the one you liked and you brushed your teeth with it and you never thought twice about it. There's something about having to think so much more about so many more products in our life that I find a little bit fatiguing. And that's where that notion of best comes in. Like, do I need the best toothbrush? I don't know. Do I need the best toaster oven, the best whatever? I don't, maybe, I don't know. So
Yeah.
since you responded strongly to wanting to have the best toothbrush, I'm curious if you can elaborate on what about that feels important, or what about that you feel drawn to.
Yeah. So I do want the best toothbrush, and I disagree with Aziz Ansari. And I think he's a comedian, and so he said it in a way that it's like everyone can relate to. I would also laugh at that joke. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
your point, I think, is more complex than it may sound right away. So I really like this idea of, like, back in the day, you would just go buy a toothbrush. I also would
Yeah.
prefer that, by the way, even though I do want the best toothbrush. But to answer your question, to me, you can't have the best toothbrush without it being electric. It has to be electric because it's not going to clean your
Mm-hmm.
teeth as well if it's an analog toothbrush. So then
Yeah.
it comes down to battery life. Is the thing going to keep beeping at you and dying, when you're traveling or something like that? It needs to
Mm-hmm.
actually last, like, a month without being charged, in my view. And
That
then
is that's a high standard.
that is what I expect from my toothbrush. My old Sonicare, before Sonicare was, like, purchased by a larger company and became lower quality, would
Uh-huh.
last a month.
Wow.
I don't mean to brag about my old Sonicare toothbrush, but it truly was excellent, a phenomenal product. Um, I think battery life is a big thing, and then sensors. If it tells you change the brush head, if it's
Uh-huh.
comfortable and ergonomic in the hand, if it can handle being in lots of water. Hopefully that's a good characteristic for a
Yeah.
toothbrush. So there are dimensions along which you can measure best, and certainly with a toaster oven you can too. There's
This
many
is
different
where
settings. Yeah.
Yeah, this is where it's hard to go backwards. I don't want to focus only on toothbrushes, but it's an interesting case study for this idea. Hopefully, you guys can see that what we're talking about is a bigger theme than any one product. It's this bigger cultural shift towards having more information. And does that actually make things easier for us, or does it make things harder? And I don't want to claim that I would prefer to be Amish and, just roll the dice with my health and just hope things go well. Information is a sort of a tremendous blessing in that sense, but it brings about some challenges as well, because now we think so much more about all these products. And as you know from me, I'm someone who likes to do a lot of research when buying things. I'm just subconsciously predisposed to this notion of best and really wanting to feel like I made the right decision. So buying a new Bluetooth speaker or something, I feel like I would do a minimum of 2 hours of research, if not more, like 6+ hours of research over multiple days. And it's a bit much, Maybe there's room for me to dial that back a bit, but the notion beneath the toothbrush example is this idea that when we didn't have when we had less information, we didn't miss it. You went to the store, you picked a toothbrush. That was just the way it was. But if you were to go to the store and select a toothbrush, you'd probably be like, well, I want to know the reviews for this thing. I want to know a bit more, and that's even reasonable. But I think that idea has come in and just firmly established itself where there's no going back. I don't think any of us can forget that we've had this exposure to vetting things more deeply, and that brings many positive things, but it also consumes a lot more of our time. If you're buying a new car, if you're looking for a crib for your baby, if you're, all these different kinds of things, many people are going to be like, we need to do the research. We need to look into these things. We need to have the best, the safest crib with no hazardous materials. And I don't disagree with any of that. I just think quickly it gives way to a more complicated way of doing things. And for the product specific thing, just coming back to the original idea, I don't think that takes the fun out of it. There's something different, like the notion of just going to the store and picking a toothbrush. There's something just simple and satisfying about that. Maybe it's just you didn't have to think about all these other things, so you just felt a little bit. You could think about other things. I don't know how to describe that exactly, but yeah, it's just interesting how things have changed. And I think the reason why we wanted to talk about this topic is because so many people have just slid right into this way of doing things. It's like, oh, that's just the modern world. You just do a paralyzing amount of research for every product that you buy because we all need to have the best. And we've lost something in that process. And that's kind of what I wanted to describe and connect with a little bit via this conversation. Can you think of any ways in which this notion of best is actually a hindrance to you, where you do miss things being simpler? Because you connected there for a minute with the toothbrush example of like, oh yeah, it was kind of nice to just go to the store and buy something, and then seem to quickly feel like, oh, but there's no going back. I can't just go back to that now that I've known this other way of doing things. Can you think of anything that contradicts that for your experience, where you do wish it were simpler and you weren't as concerned with what the best was?
Yeah, I mean, I think just to clarify, if I could snap my fingers and go back to like the 90s or something, I would, because having too much information is not good. I mean, I was just thinking as you were talking, if somebody was like, oh, that chicken you ate, was only 80% of it was properly washed or something. It's like, I don't want to know that. I could live without knowing that. So too much information is just like, we don't need it. And I think the main problem with products and lists of the best products and all the stuff that we can research is that so much of it is bullshit. So much of it is a product of marketing and advertising and affiliate links and stuff like that. If there was like a well-intentioned person, which I know we're in a silly utopian ideal, it's like a well-intentioned politician or something. It's like,
this is the world we dream of, though.
This is the world we dream of. I agree.
Yeah.
If there was a well-intentioned publication, it's sort of like what Consumer Reports has always purported to be, and maybe so. I don't know of any negative things about Consumer Reports, that basically took it upon themselves to genuinely test products and state which ones are most reliable and safe. But maybe do it on more dimensions, because Consumer Reports, for instance, will say like the number one car is like the Ford Explorer or something. And I'm like, well, maybe not for me and my needs or whatever. It breaks it down into dimensions like size of car, SUV versus coupe or whatever.
Yeah.
If someone did that, except for more things and along more dimensions, that would be better.
What you're signifying there is trustworthiness. You're indicating a world where there's inherent mistrust in people representing products because there's individual financial gain tied to that, which has blurred the lines between genuine recommendation and sales pitch. Is that accurate?
Definitely. Genuine recommendation is hard to find. Like, you must search within like Reddit forums or other forums. That's the only way you're going to find it. Maybe a review, but even reviews are so paid for nowadays. Not all of them, but many. But that's one reason. Another is that if you don't know the best and you have to kind of like see what your friend who lives right near you or whatever likes, and if he likes his toothbrush, maybe that's a recommendation that you would take. And you don't have access to reams of data about what the best product is, then there's more adventure in life. Like always having the answer at your fingertips and feeling this need to figure out what the best is, which I think is getting at your original point. Really takes out some of the fun and experimentation in life. You don't want everything to be the safest, most sanitized, best pick.
I'm trying to get at what you call that. I appreciate those points. I'm trying to get at what you call that, because in the context of the game, it made me think of fun. It takes the fun away. In the context of the toothbrush, since we were talking about toothbrushes a lot,
right.
It's not fun that it takes away. I didn't find something fun about choosing a toothbrush, but it was simpler. And I think you're making the argument for sometimes simpler is better. You have more peace of mind, like the chicken example or something like that. Certain things maybe that you have less control over, having more information there can be worrisome or maybe debilitating to some degree, because what can you do about it, And I think that's something that comes up, separate conversation there about information overload. I want to try to keep us just on focusing on this aspect of best. So in the video game context, it's the fun way. In the toothbrush or product context, it takes away some peace of mind or just kind of that more relaxed mental state. I think additionally, we've taken for granted how many things we're thinking about and doing now that occupies our mind. We're on our phones all the time, we're checking emails, we're looking things up. There's just such a preoccupation with taking information in, and I think that's its own subject, but that does relate to this best as well, where I don't know, I think we're very good at filling our time with this information that we're constantly bathed and saturated in the world we live in, and that is helpful in a lot of ways. I think you could probably correlate increased information with increased life expectancy. There's like how that manifests in the scientific community and other things that do better our lives. But as in sort of the individual experience, I think it can be overwhelming and overloading. And this notion of best relating to products or ways of doing things, or like, what's the best way to get rid of fruit flies or something like that? And that could easily be its own rabbit hole that somebody goes down, when in the past you would just go to the store and be like, hey, do you have any fruit fly traps? And then you'd put the trap up and it would probably work to some degree, and you weren't worried about, is there a better option somewhere? Can I find this? Just because that wasn't a possibility. We didn't have the same access to information. So all this is trying to say something changes. I think the word of what changes depends on the context, the product thing, the video game thing, or any other possible avenues. So yeah, it's hard to pin down what's going on there, because we're having to strip back so many layers that we take for granted in our normal lives. This is just built into how things are now for most people in modern society. But yeah.
Well, I would say that it's a concept many people have heard of. When there's too many choices, that's not necessarily good. We like to have limited choices. And, back in the day, if you needed a product, you would go to one of, whatever 8 local stores. It would either be at the pharmacy or the electronics store or the toy store or the grocery store, so like you would just know, okay, I'm just going to go to that. So you have more space in your mind to think about other things. Perhaps too many choices is debilitating. Just to take what you said already and kind of try to settle what it is about feeling like you need to research everything. That's not good.
Yeah.
A context that I see the best a lot that really bothers me is with schools, because I've got a young child, and people very freely, without thinking about it, say things like, this is a top school. And they say it like in a very convincing way. This is one of the top schools, in, New Jersey or whatever. And I and most people probably, when they hear that, depending on how convinced they are by that person's tone and the look in their eye, don't even think twice about what they're saying. Just take their word for it. But by what standard? Who decided that it's the best? I mean, this is so subjective. It's you could make a good argument if you say, well, the teachers are experienced, they care, they love working with children, they're creative. I mean, like, if you could prove these things, then I would say, okay, well, that sounds like a well-sourced, backed up statement. But usually it's just some publication put it out there. And what was the incentive of the publication? And what were their standards? So it's like, I don't like how much people throw on the best without really thinking about it independently.
This is a fantastic angle that I'm so glad you brought up, because it's so true. And there's so much that comes out of this. This connects to what you were talking about with people writing reviews online, where it's like, maybe they have an affiliate link. So they're saying this is the best hiking boot because if people buy it and they make a convincing argument for it, they'll make money from that.
Yep.
So we kind of touched on that one, but that's present here as well. Where I also see this is, well, 2 things. One, some people are very swayed by that kind of confidence. This connects to the other talk that we did where we were talking about people, influencers specifically, speaking with a high degree of confidence and how convincing that can be, even if they're just totally bullshitting you. Now, the talk we did about movies and visual media and their influence on us. So there are some people that are very swayed by that. They hear someone say, this is a top school, and they go, wow, this is a top school, right away, they're totally on board. The other thing that I wanted to say about this is similar to the affiliate link aspect, reason why someone would support a product or say a product is best is they stand to make money from it. There's another kind of person who wants to say something is the best because if other people buy it, they'll feel better about their own purchase. Mm-hmm. And you may have seen this with people that have certain cars, like, oh, BMW, you got to get a BMW. It's the best car on the road, you know. And if they convince other people to buy BMWs, then they feel better about their purchase, you know, of like, oh, people do like these. Maybe in someone saying that so confident, there's perhaps some insecurity deep down, like the school. Oh, this is a top school. And then if other people go, they go, oh, wow, these other people agree. This is a top school. Now I feel even better about that. I don't know if this rings true for you, but I've definitely had that experience of people wanting to suggest something to other people and maybe even inflate their experience with it because other people choosing that will make them feel better. So that's another way where they're not making money from it, but they're gaining something from that still. So another interesting angle of things being the best and how that kind of the psychology of that from a lot of different angles. Does that make you think of anything with regarding those totally. Personality types?
Well, It makes me think of an example that this is probably the most extreme example that proves the point you made, but it's right where my mind goes, is when I've talked to people about the number of kids to have, because this is a subject people have a lot of opinions about. They don't always talk about it, but
20 is best.
So if I say something like, man, I don't know if I'd want 3 kids or something, that would be like, you know, a lot of work. Yeah. And I'm talking to someone that has 3 kids. No one has ever said, you're probably right. You probably shouldn't have 3 kids. Like someone might joke, but they're like,
we should have stopped at 2. The third was a mistake. Don't do it.
No one has ever said that, obviously, because they're committed, bought it in. And of course, it's a human being they love. So they genuinely feel that way. That's why I said it's an extreme example. But I do think it proves the same point, because if they could think truly objectively, they would think back to what it's like to have 2 or 1 and say, well, there were some things that were much better. I think probably overall it is better to have 2 or 1 or something like that. I just know that I can't get that information because people are so biased by the fact that they've fully committed to it and they know what their life is like, and maybe their life is good with that situation. And yet it still could have been better with the prior situation or a different one.
Perfect example. The best example I can think of for that premise, because that is the decision that the most people will be most bought into. The car, they're like, maybe I'll get something different for a car. Kids, it's like, there's no going back from that. You know, it's like, you've chosen this family, you got to be all in or you're going to be miserable. So that's a great example. But I think you described it well afterwards in terms of how that can span into other categories, which is the degree that you're bought into something. If you have made a large commitment, especially one where you even worry you've made a bad decision. And so you're kind of like, oh, I really got to go all in on this or I'm going to feel terrible. Those are the people who are often very vocal about the best place to live or the best way to do something or something, because they are in a way trying to justify a position they're in. It could be a position that they're genuinely happy with, or it could be a position that they're unhappy with, but either way, they're all in and they're going to have to, generally, they're going to want to be in support of that because it's going to improve their day-to-day experience.
Totally.
Yeah, so I'm just in discussing these, I'm so struck by how many different aspects of psychology come into play here. And it makes perfect sense because, you know, as humans, we have all kinds of blind spots, and, you know, we think that we're very level-headed and clear in looking at things, but we have tons of blind spots, and, you know, we make silly decisions or silly recommendations to feel better about decisions we made, or, you know, we all do this in one way or another to varying degrees. But yeah, it's so interesting to talk about this for me because I feel like I discover a lot of things. And I really enjoy that aspect of discovery. And that's part of the reason why we wanted to bring these talks to a broader audience, because we can have these kind of talks for hours on a daily basis, probably. And thought there's something interesting to this, you know, other people might find this interesting as well. So if you do find this interesting, let us know in the comments below, you know, share your thoughts on this. And that's part of the conversation that we find particularly interesting and valuable is, obviously, we enjoy the perspective that we each add to the conversation, but hearing from more people with differing points of view is fantastic. So if you're watching this video and you have enjoyed anything discussed or felt inspired by or want to share your own thoughts, please do so down below. And go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe as well to show your support for this channel. And we would love to keep making videos. But yeah, just coming back to that aspect of how much psychology plays a role here. And is there anything that you were thinking of before I interrupted with the plugs for the channel?
There's one last concept I'd love to cover. And because it's one I've thought a lot about, and when I came to it, I felt like it was a really good insight. So at least I feel that way. We'll see if you do.
Yeah.
Which is to determine what really is the best for you, given the fact that best is such a personal idea. Mm-hmm. The ideal way to do that would be to identify people similar to you who have similar tastes, mm-hmm. and see what they consider the best. And people will have similar tastes in one respect, but not another. So for instance, I think many of us can relate to the idea that we've met someone that likes the same restaurants as us, perhaps the same books, perhaps the same movies, not all the same, but you generally know, oh, if this person recommends that TV show, I'm probably going to like it because we tend to like the same shows. Mm-hmm. That person, we can call them a tastemaker in the respect of, whatever the media or object is we're talking about. Mm-hmm. If you were able to get a collection of tastemakers in every different thing that you would ever want recommended, that to me would be the ultimate way to find what is truly the best, and eliminate a lot of the problems of there being like 100 different angles to what is the best restaurant or whatever, or best movie. Yeah. And I dream of a world where AI is used as a recommendation engine by capturing people that like, if you give your top 50 movies, anyone that has like 20 of them in common, that's a tastemaker. They can recommend movies to you, and so on and so forth with every different type of thing that would be recommended. I think that would be awesome.
That would be absolutely awesome. And I think you're describing something. I've thought about this as well in a context I'll describe in a second, but I think you are touching on something here that must exist in the future. I mean, it's a win-win, right? People want to find more movies, shows, restaurants, whatever it is that they will enjoy, but it can be hard to do so. And businesses or media companies or whoever it is want more people to find what it is they have. The difficulty is, how do you connect people with that when there's such a tremendous variety of personalities and tremendous variety of restaurants, visual media, music, all that kind of stuff. There's just so much and so many different kinds of people that it's tremendously hard to do that. And the context that I immediately thought of, that I thought about this in before, is relating to music and suggested playlists. So going to mention one company by name, Spotify, please sponsor us. They have their Discover Weekly playlist, right? This is their best attempt. I mean, they are a huge company. They have a ton of talented people working for them. Discover Weekly, I think, is their best attempt to match users with new music, right? And the more you listen to music, the more money everybody makes. It seems to be that gluing you to that platform is beneficial for everyone involved who's making money off that. What I had thought before, because I've tried the Discover Weekly playlist, and I find maybe one song every 2 weeks that I like. So that's like 1 out of 60, roughly.
Sucks. Yeah,
it sucks. And I'm like, they really do not understand me. A lot of what they suggest, I'm like, I don't like this at all. What is going on here?
I don't think our sponsorship's going well so far, Cody.
Yeah, well, we're pitching a new product. We're pitching a new product, so we're balancing it out a little bit. This feature could be improved. Here's our ideas how, and then we can have a beautiful sponsored relationship after that. Very similar to the tastemaker thing you were describing. I'm like, they should be looking at other people who have a large overlap in music that I have saved. If they can find someone else who's like, he's saved 50% of the same songs.
Yeah.
Suggest what he's listening to that I'm not listening to, or she, or whoever. That is going to be a high likelihood of giving me some new music that I will like. It's like, you need to use people for this job. I think trying to do it with AI and like tags where it's like, oh, he liked this country song, so we'll give him this other country song. Like, it's too broad of a tag at that point. The tastes are very specific and very nuanced and very individualistic. And so I think you need to do that with people. It's like, find people that have at least 10, 15, 20% overlap in music, something like that, where, you can get some of the variety mixed in there, and then start suggesting things that they're listening to, and maybe they've experimented with this and it doesn't work as well as it seems like it would, but I just feel like this idea of tastemakers and bringing it back to the human level as a way to recommend what is best to someone when it comes down to more subjective things, I feel like that has to be the future. And it would be using AI or something to then connect the human levels, but it's like, you got to use the human as like the sensor of that music or of that restaurant or something, and then figure out how to bridge those people together to give new recommendations. But I love that you brought that up, because I've thought about that before, and I'm like, that has to be things go. It's got to be where things go. There's nothing better. It's like computers are trying to suggest, and they just can't do that. And I think a computer that could do that, I would be frightened of that computer existing in the world. It's like, no, it's too good. That we don't need computers to be that good.
Totally. I also feel like that has to happen. I'm shocked that it hasn't happened, because I have talked about this idea for many years. I don't have, the most original thoughts ever kind of thing. Like, I'm sure many people have thought of this, but I have not seen it. I mean, I think Pandora, the original Pandora from whatever, 15 years ago, did a pretty good job of recommending similar things. And they used an algorithm that, looked at the levels of like treble and tone, I don't know, music stuff, but I thought they did a decent job. Spotify has gone way backwards, and like, I'm sorry, I need to shit on them 1 second. The recommendations underneath, there's a playlist I listen to all the time, and they have those recommendations underneath. Perfectly fine recommendations. They're not amazing. They're not bad either. But they don't give away to say, remove this recommendation. I've already listened to it and I don't like it. And because of that, they've had the same recommendations for like months and months. And I'm like, how many times can I tell you, I don't want these songs? Give me new ones and I'll teach your algorithm, and that will help me. This is not a feature that Spotify has. Therefore, discovering new music is very difficult on Spotify. And I have to imagine they would like me to discover new music on Spotify.
Yeah, I think so as well. So this has gotten about to the point that we wanted to get to, I think, with this conversation. Very interesting as always, and something I love about these in particular, and hope you watching as well feel similarly, is that we have similar ways of looking at things, but different perspectives. And so it's very enjoyable to hear the perspective that you bring to it, because it's often similar to what I think, in most cases, not always, but it brings something new that I hadn't thought about before, which I find so enjoyable. I don't know what it is about my voracious appetite for new information and discovery, but that's my favorite thing about having these conversations, is just getting new ideas that are coming from a person who thinks very similarly. And again, part of the reason for doing the channel here was hoping to connect with other people out there who feel similarly. So if you enjoyed this, please leave us a comment. Let us know your thoughts on anything, whether it be the content we discussed, things you'd like to hear us discuss in the future, the length of the videos, whether you want them longer or shorter, format, anything like that. We're open to all feedback right now, and would love to hear from people who are watching as well. If you can give a like to the video, that will help it get discovered and widen the network of like-minded people that we're looking to create, and people with different perspectives as well. And then lastly, go ahead and subscribe. We will be doing more of these videos in the future. This is something, again, that is so rewarding for us that couldn't think of anything I'd rather be making videos about. So looking forward to that. Any closing thoughts for us from you?
I think you said it all.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.
Thanks.